And we're live. Hey guys, it's Lev from Trotec Canada. Welcome to this Job Control webinar basics. I'm here with Anthony Gibson and our technical director, John Cawley. That we're very thankful for joining us. For the more advanced questions, John can cover those basics, but the webinar will be run by Anthony. And if you guys have any questions, I'll be going through them myself. So, Anthony, if you want to take it away, I'm going to put you as the presenter.
Let's do it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Job Control webinar. We're going to show you how to utilize Job Control so you can get using your laser. Let's share my screen here.
And Anthony, if you want to put the webcam on the laser too.
Yep.
Okay, so we need to do some cutting. Perfect. And today we're going to be using our Speedy 400, 100 watt, I believe. Okay, so I guess what we're going to start with is we've already done webinars on Illustrator, Corel, and Inkscape in terms of the design files. So what Anthony's going to do, he's going to start right from printing, so we can go from there and go directly through all the Job Control features.
All right, so I've opened up CorelDRAW here, and we've made a test file. So from here, you're going to want to send it to your laser. So to do that, come here and press the print, and it'll open up your printing window here. The first thing you're going to do is go to our preferences. Before doing so, make sure that your Trotec engraver is selected as your main printer. So here you'll see the Trotec Job Control preferences. Everything that you need to know to set up for your file should be in here. So let's go through here. We have our material size here. So this is going to be the size of the material that you're actually putting into your laser. Should be this size. It should be bigger than the file that you're creating here. If you're not too sure what type of material you're going to be using, maybe you're engraving something onto a product that you bought and you're customizing it, you can come here and click on the minimize the job size. What that'll do is minimize your area here that is going to be sent to the laser down to the smallest size possible, which will be our widest cut line here.
Also, we just had a quick question from somebody. The Job Control version that we're going to be using is Job Control 11. It's the new version that was literally released this month.
Yeah, we'll try our best to cover some of the changes that some people might not see here that we have. So moving on, we come down here to our material settings. You can set your material settings here from the preferences. And we'll show you this again once we move to Job Control. But you can select your material and its thickness. And that should give you the correct power, velocity, and PPI there.
Anthony, I just want to mention, usually like your page size is 5 by 5 in Corel, if you want to just hover the mouse over the 5 by 5. And this is what we want the size to be in our Job Control print, so 5 by 5, right?
Right, so we could change this to 5 by 5. That way we know that our material is our engraving is going to fall on our material no matter what. If you're not sure, you can come here and select the minimize the job size, and that will only send your files over. So just everything inside the red line here. If without this selected, you will be sending this entire page here. So moving on. Next, we have our process options here. There's a lot of little things in here that can benefit you very highly. So we'll start with standard here. Of course, it's our standard mode. If you just got your laser, this is don't change anything, stay with standard, and you should be good. We'll move on down here. We have our stamp mode here. If you are going to be making stamps, Trotec's made it very easy. In JobControl, you could take your file, select the stamp mode, and it'll automatically reverse it and flip it so it works perfectly as a stamp. Next, we'll go to relief.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, we have a full video for stamps. If you guys type in Trotec Canada stamp on YouTube, there is a video of step-by-step on how we're engraving a stamp.
That's right. But next we have relief. We also have a video on this as well. We use relief mode to do 3D engraving. So we did do a great webinar on how you can do that, or where you could find files to do 3D engraving. And
sorry, John, do you want to just explain how relief engraving works? We had a lot of questions about that.
Sure. So essentially with relief mode, what it's doing is it's going to look like it's doing a regular engraving job. So the head's going to go back and forth over the job like it normally does. But instead of always engraving at the same power, basically the lighter the dot, each individual pixel, it's going to engrave with less power, and the darker the dot is going to engrave with more power. So it does it basically, you do it in the same amount of time, but it really just depends on how light or dark each pixel is in the drawing, how much power it actually gets hit with by the laser.
So for example, if you have 50% black, it'll hit it with 50% of the power you select, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks, John. Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
So next we got our layer mode. I'll let John explain this one as well for you guys.
Yeah, layer mode is similar to relief mode, but instead of doing the job once and varying the laser power on the fly, it actually breaks the job up into multiple layers. So in this case here, we have layers selected at 12. So in this case here, we'll actually break the job up and actually engrave it 12 times. But the darker dots will get engraved all 12 times, and the lightest dots may only get engraved once. So you get a more extreme 3D effect, but it isn't as smooth as relief mode, and it takes obviously 12 times longer because you're doing it 12 times.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
So moving on to photo optimized. What would you say about this, John?
Yeah, photo optimized is basically I call it a quick and dirty method of engraving photos. If you're doing something where the artwork is very conducive to good quality results, then it will work quite nicely. I personally like to adjust this, do the photo adjustments myself in CorelDRAW, and we have a couple of good videos, I believe, on that as well. Is that correct, Lev?
Yeah, we have a whole webinar with Mike Clark, one of the first ones we did. And I know Mike did a lot of videos on getting your file right for photo engraving.
Yeah, if you guys want to check out some how to do photo engraving, check out Mike's videos. They're great, and you'll definitely get some great photos after that. This, again, like John said, is if you have a super high definition photo, you might be able to get away with using this, but check out those videos by Mike, and he'll show you how to make them as best as they can be. So next, we're moving on to a seal. So seal is another great feature that Trotec put here in JobControl. It'll easily take your design, and using the seal selected, it'll turn it into an exact negative of that design. So what you can do with this, if you use a special material such as Delrin, you can engrave both sides and cut them out, and they will fit into each other. So you can make a seal.
And again, I want to mention we do have a separate video for that. We just don't want to clog this webinar with stuff that we've already covered, but we have a separate video for how to make seals in Delrin, and we show a step-by-step. Also, we had a question if this webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded, so after it's done, it will be on our YouTube channel, so you guys can watch it and ask questions in the description, and then we'll answer them after the fact if you have any further questions.
For sure. The seals are great for legal letters and just to make anything look a little bit more fancy and put that finishing touch on. Next, we have cut job. Cut job is exactly what it sounds like. It'll send over just the cut lines of your job over to the laser. So if you do have some engravings and stuff that you don't want the laser to recognize, maybe it'll take a little bit longer to load. If you have a lot of engraving, you could just select cut job and it'll send just the cut lines that you had in that file. So we'll move on to our resolution. Here we have different resolutions. By making the resolution lower, it will it'll speed up your job, but you are going to be losing quality when engraving.
John, could you also comment on the resolution? I mean, when would we use like 1,000 versus, the middle range and the low end, the DPIs?
Sure thing. So typically on the CO2 laser, we don't go any more than 500 DPI. And that's because the size of the CO2 laser spot is large enough that you don't see any appreciable difference if you go up to 600 or 1,000 DPI. You're just basically hitting the same area more times. The reason we have the higher resolutions is if you're using the fiber laser. So that would be on one of our fiber systems or flex systems. The fiber has a much, much smaller spot size. So it's actually very important that you use 1,000 DPI because the size of the spot is so small that if you engrave with one of the lower resolutions, you'll find that you actually see gaps in between each of the engraving lines. And that's just because the spot size is too small to actually fill them in at like 500 DPI, for instance.
So for photo engraving, would you recommend more DPI in that case?
No, 500 DPI is still perfectly fine as long with the CO2 laser.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks, John.
All right. Yeah, so if you guys are using a CO2 laser, keep it under 500. If you're using a fiber laser, you can then bump it up to 600 or 1,000. So moving on here, we have our cut line. This is pretty nifty. If you hadn't made a cut mark in your design file, you could come here and use this to cut out the design that you're using. This is great if you're making ID tags that you're making with our materials here. So if you select none, obviously nothing's going to get cut. Rectangular here will cut a perfect rectangle around your design here. And then as we move through here, you'll see it'll try to make a as best shape here using curves to cut a curved line around your design. And using optimize, it'll come in here and cut perfectly around all of these shapes that you have here.
And Anthony, that's if you don't have a cut line in the artwork, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, but we usually, I mean, to have more control, we would put the cut line in the artwork file. I mean, this is just for a quick test. It's a great feature to have.
It's usually used on rubber stamps actually, where you might actually not have a cut line on the stamp. So the optimized actually works very well to avoid the back printing that you would get on a rubber stamp if you didn't have a close cut background.
Okay.
That's right. So for this file, because we have our cut line around here, there's no need really to use the cut line. But if this wasn't here, we can select the cut line and it would generate a rectangular or circular cut line for us. So we'll select none here. And moving on to our halftones. So you'll see a few different options in halftones. This is, if you do watch our photo optimization videos, there are a few options here that you can select. We, when doing photos, like to use Stucky most of the time. There are different modes here for different applications, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is what we like to say here. So it really depends on what you're looking for.
John, can you also comment on these four? I mean, what's really the difference in them? Is it just a pattern of the dot?
Yeah, so what it's doing is when you take a color photograph to send it to the laser, obviously the laser can't engrave in color. So what it does is it does a process called dithering. So it's taking a series of a dot pattern to approximate the colors in your drawing. And these are the different methods that it uses to do it. The ordered dithering is basically a fixed pattern throughout. Some people really like it. They think it looks great. I find that pattern to be kind of distracting. So I personally don't like it. That's why I prefer Stucky like Anthony does. But some people really prefer their dithering. So like Anthony said, beauty is really in the eye of the beholder. The other one that's on there is the Floyd Steinberg. I find it to be a little on the dark side. So if you're engraving on like anodized aluminum, you can use it. But if you try to use it on wood, for instance, I find the results aren't very good. There's too many pulses, and you tend to actually end up blowing areas of the wood away. So you tend not to get the same detail as you would on a lighter dithering method like Stucky.
Perfect.
Yeah, so there's going to be a little bit of trial and error here for you guys to figure out which one you like best. Again, we like Stucky. That's what we use for our photos. So it's a good start to use. There is another feature with order dithering. We do use this sometimes. If you do have a large file with tons of engraving in it, and you know you're only going to be doing the cut lines, you can select order dithering to send your job over without it having to load as long. So moving on to color. If you're sending a file over that has maybe multiple colors like this one, 2, 3 or more, you're going to want to use color mode. What will happen if you use any of these other ones, it's only ever going to read the red cut lines. So if we were to send this over without the color mode on, we wouldn't get our blue lines sent over. So we wouldn't be able to assign properties to them. So for this, we will use color mode because we want to send over our blue and red lines.
Yeah, so for a lot of the videos that if you guys see us doing kiss cutting, we do the blue line or the red line as a kiss cut, and then we do the other color as a full cut.
That's right.
Also for engraving, if you're doing different colors, you can set different depths in your engraving. Like we did a cabinet drawer a couple of years ago, and we had like the Canadian coat of arms at 3 different colors, and it was actually 3 different styles on the wood. So it's a little different from the relief mode where it adjusts. It'll do the job 3 times, 3 different engravings, but it depends on what you're going for. Also, it's really good to do if you saw our WHAM video that we did the reverse engraving with 5 different colors. That's basically how we did it. 5 different engraving colors that we chose. So it'll do one job. We flip it, spray paint it, let it dry, go back, engrave the second color, and on and on. So that's what it's good for. We got a couple of questions. What's the difference between Stuckey and Jarvis dithering? I don't know if we covered that directly, but John, is there any specific difference, or it's just the way?
The different air diffusion patterns, the end result looks quite similar, to be honest, between the 2 of them, but the method behind it is just slightly different.
Okay. And then another question we have is, what do you recommend for seals under color, black and white, and enhanced geometry? John, do you have a comment for that? If like, what would you recommend for seals?
Typically, yeah, you'll find that in seal mode, it is typically black and white you would use, yeah, because you're either engraving or not engraving with that, similar to like a regular engraving job.
Okay. And yeah, we'll cover enhanced geometries as soon as we're done these options.
Okay, so that's it for color. So moving on to black and white, this is great if you want to do a quick engraving of a logo, if you got it, if the background is somewhat white. You can easily send in a bitmap and convert it to all black, and it'll engrave that bitmap or logo or what it may be. So this can save you time rather than having to drag a logo into CorelDRAW and having to vectorize it. You can try this method and hope that it works. If your photo's high enough resolution, you shouldn't have any problems. But again, if you have a low quality photo and there is some resolution issues on the edges of your shapes, it might not give you the quality that you're looking for.
John, I guess the invert you'd really use for, I mean, if you're engraving any black acrylic or granite, like a photo engraving, you'll have to invert the colors, right? That's really what it's basically there for.
Exactly, yeah. So on a piece of black marble, for instance, the engraving is white. So you actually will want to invert your image so that the areas that turn out white on the piece are the areas that are actually black in your engraving. So that's why you would want to invert it.
Okay, we got another question. For various engraving depths in acrylic, what lens length would you suggest?
It really depends on how deep you're trying to go. In general, deep engraving in single pass becomes difficult with acrylic because you end up with some molten slag left behind. So for doing that, it's really done best with multiple passes rather than trying to do it all in one shot. And the lens doesn't really matter so much as far as that's concerned. Anything typical for engraving 1.5 to 2.5 inches is fine.
Perfect. Thanks, John. I guess
Okay.
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, so we're moving on, or is there any more questions, Lev?
Nope, we're good.
Perfect. So yes, as John was mentioning before, we're moving on to our invert selection here. Invert, there's a couple different applications you might use this for. One being if you're doing anything on a darker surface, you're going to want to use the invert. Because it's a darker surface, you're going to be exposing the lighter surface underneath your material, and that is why you would want to invert this. You might want to do this on a mirror, possibly, but again, darker surfaces is usually when we use this. Moving on to flip vertically and flip horizontally. Obviously, you can see there exactly what it's doing. And it's flipping vertically and flipping horizontally here. So
yeah, I guess what you'd use the horizontal if you're doing any kind of reverse engraving on the back of an acrylic, or if you're using like Trolley's reverse or Troglass reverse and you're engraving on the back, you'd have to flip it horizontally.
That's right. For you signage guys out there, if you're making signs and they're going to be, they're requesting them to be on the inside of a window, you're going to have to, I guess it depends on what material you use, but this will come in handy. If you're engraving on a clear acrylic on the other side, opposite side, and again, we have tons of videos on us using this method. So moving on to enhanced geometries, I'll let John give you guys an explanation.
Yes, essentially without enhanced geometries checked, so if it's off, what it does is if you send over a circle to JobControl, what it's going to do is it's basically going to take a picture of your drawing, and it's going to try to fit a series of short lines around that circle to make the circle. So essentially, if you cut that on a piece of like fabric, for instance, you probably won't see the difference. But if you cut it on something like acrylic, you will see the difference. You'll actually see those little flat facets along the edge. So if we turn on enhanced geometries, what that does is it tells CorelDRAW to send over the true arc to JobControl. So when we cut out that same piece of acrylic, we'll have a nice smooth arc versus those choppy facets that we had before.
Yeah, so if you're doing something that requires high quality, I would suggest using the enhanced geometries. Moving on to inner geometries first. This is, I would suggest that you would always use this. I don't know if there is an application why you wouldn't want to use this, except for maybe there's something in the way of your laser head. So what this essentially does is, if we are cutting out our letters here, let's do this. So if we are cutting our letters out here, we would want to cut our letters out first, especially our inside of our inner geometries of our letters here, before cutting out this exact shape here, if we are cutting a rectangle here. The reason why we wanted to do that, and we have mentioned this in other videos, if you were to cut this out, this piece out here, and for instance, it was wood, the wood may not be sitting properly in your laser, or it might be a little bit warped, or not perfectly square. So once it's done being cut, it might move a little bit, drop a little bit. So when it goes to cut these inner geometries, they might not necessarily be 100% in their perfect position as you design them. So by having this inner geometry first checked off, your laser will first cut out any inner geometries before cutting out geometries that are outside of them. So we'll keep that selected.
John, would you say most times you want enhanced geometries and the geometries first checked off?
Correct. Yeah, most of the time you want both of those checked on. There's really no reason to turn them off.
Perfect. Thanks.
So moving on, we're going to send this over to JobControl shortly. Before I do so, I just wanted to point out that we are going to be posting this online for you guys to view afterwards. But if you're not too sure of some of these checkboxes or drop-down menus, if you hover over them, you can see down here, there is a description for everything that we talked about here. So if that doesn't clear it up, just go back and watch the video, and you should be good.
Yeah, and
so
also just a quick mention about the rotary attachment icon. We don't usually use it in this section. We would actually use it in JobControl.
That's right. Okay, so I think we're good here. Let's change this. And we'll keep this selected for this test. And we're good to go. So from here, we'll press print. And now CorelDRAW will send this to our JobControl. Here I'm going to name the file. And you should get a notification from your JobControl app here. Let's go into job control. And now we're in job control.
Anthony, I'm just going to jump in for 1 second. When it asks you for the job name, that's a setting that can be turned on and off in the printer driver. So by default, the printer driver will automatically grab your job name from the file name in CorelDRAW. But if you don't want it to do that, actually, Anthony's doing it on screen here. You can change that job name to ask for job name, in which case it will ask you for the name like it did here in our example.
So now that we're in job control, the first thing that you're going to want to do, if you haven't done it already, is ready up your laser. So our laser is already ready, so it is a play symbol here now, but you'll want to click on the ready to initiate your laser. Once your laser's on, you're going to want to start engraving and cutting your materials with your files. So all the files that we sent to job control have come here into our job queue.
And I just want to mention quickly, if you sent relief mode or photo optimize mode or anything that's not standard and you don't see it in the job queue, you want to click show all. That way it'll appear. Anthony, if you want to just hover over the show all link under the job, yeah, right there. That we have a lot of people asking about that.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, it's not showing up or it's taking a long time to load. Click that button if you can, and sometimes that does speed up the process or makes it load. So moving on here, there's two ways you can put your job onto your working area here. You can just take your job of your choice here, and we have tons of jobs here from previous demos. You could take your job, just drag it onto your working area anywhere you want, let go, and you can see the job here. You can take that same file, double click, and it'll get sent to our top corner here.
Can I just quickly mention for those who are like very, very new and very like beginners, Anthony, sorry, if you want to go back to that, like that white area is our actual physical, it's a virtual representation of the actual physical table size. So you see it's like 38 and a bit over 23 and a bit. That's the size of the laser. So where you put the job is basically where you have the material on the physical laser bed, just for those who don't know.
That's right, and that actually leads me. So you guys see there's blue crosshairs here, and this is one of the greatest features of job control. Huge benefit, it's gonna save you tons of time and tons of materials. So what that is our laser head, and it's actually moving in real time. So right now I have our laser in standby mode, and if I move this around, you can see that the laser head crosshairs are moving there on the screen. So go here real quick. So if I move this laser head, you can see our red dot pointer there. That is where our crosshairs are going to be. So if you did have a piece of material, maybe you're cutting out a slice of paper here, and you didn't know where you wanted to place it, you can then move this anywhere you want. Place your material, or place your laser head over the material. And now there's no thinking about it, really. You just go back to job control.
Oh, wait, Anthony, sorry, before you go back, can you show them the keypad as well, that you can move the head with the keypad, not just manually?
Yeah, we can show you that. So right now our laser's in standby mode, which allows us to move this around freely, which is great. Or as Lev was saying, you can come here and take it out of standby mode using the power button. And now using your D-pad, or directional pad on your laser, you can now move your laser like so.
Yeah, and you want to make sure not to move it when it's not in standby mode, like manually.
That's correct. I'll show you guys this as well. I will get to that a little bit later, actually. So back to job control here. So now that we know that our material is under this blue crosshair, we can literally just drag our job over here. Now you can see when you drag your job anywhere close to that hairline, it's going to snap to one of the corners, or drag it close to the center and it'll snap directly to the center. Again, this is going to save you tons of time. And just before we move on, I wanted to show you, we did send the file over. So you can see here, there's a white box that you can't really see. This is what, when we sent our file over, we did this. We sent that file over without having minimized the job size selected. So it sent over this entire white square along with the design. When having this checked, what that'll do is you can see the difference here. It sent our file over with the smallest outline that it can do. But of course, this is going to be helpful to you, or it could be a nuisance depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to put this into the top corner of your material, it's going to be really hard to do that. It's actually going to be impossible. When using this file, because we have that box. So that's just to give you a better description and feel for what that minimize the job size button is going to do.
We have a quick question. Is there an option in the new job control to switch from inches to centimeters or millimeters? John, is that only in the new one? I think the old ones have it as well.
Yeah, the old ones have it as well. Centimeters isn't it's either inches or millimeters, but the rulers will show up, I believe, in centimeters if you're in millimeters mode, just because the numbers are shorter, so it's easier to display.
So Anthony, do you want to show how to switch that? Sorry, Anthony, where did you go? Did you go to settings, options?
Yeah, the settings options, it's there.
Settings, options. Well, there's also a quick icon here. And where are we?
Right on the main screen there.
Oh, there it is. And yeah, so switch that to millimeters and you should be good.
So that's available on all job control versions, right, John?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. Anthony, what do we have next?
Yeah, so up next, we're going to be talking about, so where are we? Material settings. Let's jump into our material settings. So we have our file here on our working area. We'll want to assign some properties to these lines and these texts so the laser knows what to do with them. So if you are using some of the materials that you bought from Trotec, you should be able to select them in your material database, which you can find by double-clicking your working area. Again, that's double-clicking the working area, and your material database should show up. There's also an icon at the top here. You can click that to bring up the same screen. So here's our material database. On the left-hand window here, you're going to see pretty much, you should have all the materials that we sell here at Trotec here. You should be able to select a material, such as acrylic, and then select its thickness. And that should give you a pretty good place to start, if not a perfect place to start with your laser for that material. It'll auto-generate the power, speed, and PPI for your engraving and your cut job. So you should be able to just get going with your laser. So if you are using materials that we don't sell, of course you want to engrave your own things or people's items, you can create your own material here. So first we'll create a material group. So maybe you have a special, I don't know, a special wood that you have from a certain product. So we can come here, click here. We'll name this. Geez. All right, we'll create a new group here. Plastics. And then once we have that new group, we can now create some different thicknesses in that group. So we'll have a 2 millimeter plastic material. So once you have...
Yeah, I just want to mention this. It's great if you're doing testing and you have like the specific settings. I mean, the settings that we provide either in the videos or in the documents on the website, they're just a starting point. I mean, every material, like every laser, we always recommend to test it yourself, get the most optimal results. There is a grayscale matrix that you can download, and basically there's a whole page on our channel. Sorry, on our website that I will post in the description afterwards, that you can do for testing the perfect engraving that you want. And then you can save those settings, not just for materials, but even the settings that you want. For example, if you want to engrave a clear acrylic, you'd go out of focus. You can save that setting. If you want to do engrave white on acrylic, it'll be in focus. So you can save that as a separate setting. So this is why it's such an amazing tool to use within JobControl.
Yeah, the whole thing here is to streamline your working process. So we want you guys to basically not think about anything, select it. Once it's set up, it's there. You'll never have to think about it again. So we have our 2mm plastic here. And once you have that 2mm plastic, you don't know the settings that you want to use. So like Lev said, you'll want to run that dot matrix graph to find out the perfect settings.
It doesn't just have to be the graph matrix. I mean, you can literally engrave a half-inch square to test, and then keep engraving it at different power settings if you want. The dot matrix just makes it, the grayscale matrix, sorry, it just makes it a lot easier because it just gives you a bunch of little squares all together at different settings. Yeah, so if you just want to adjust it a little bit, just do one square at a time.
That's right. So to do so, if you look at our file here, we have some black font here that we're going to want to engrave, and a red cut line here. So we'll go to our black color here, and we're going to select engrave with our CO2 laser, because for this purpose we are engraving our plastics.
Sorry, Anthony, could you go through each of them?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a few selections here in your drop-down menu. Engrave with your CO2 laser is, you would be engraving with your CO2 laser source in your laser. If you're engraving with a fiber laser source, you're engraving with your fiber laser source. If you have a flex laser.
If you don't have a fiber or flex, you won't have that option.
This is cutting with your CO2, cutting with your fiber laser. So maybe for kiss cuts or something with your laser, with your fiber laser there. Skip will skip the color completely. Positioning is for positioning, and we have our reg marks here. We do have videos using our reg marks, using our vision camera system. You can select this so they could find those reg marks and cut your material or your product or whatever it may be.
Yeah, we got lots of videos on JobControl vision, the camera system with the reg mark. John, can you quickly just mention what positioning is?
Yeah, so if you have positioning vectors and you do edit outline job, it will follow the positioning vectors rather than drawing a box around the outside of the area to be engraved.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so we're going to engrave with our CO2 source here. And for our red line here, we're going to want to cut it. So we'll select our cut with CO2 source. And if you do remember, we did send over our file with a blue line in it as well. And for whatever reason, it's not showing up here. Don't be alarmed. You just have to activate it in your material database. So if you send files over and something's not showing up, most likely your color isn't selected. So we'll go to our blue here, and we're going to select cut with the CO2. And now we can see our blue line here.
I should also quickly mention a lot of issues I had when I first started using the laser. I kept forgetting when I did the cuts, I kept forgetting to put the line as the thinnest line. So in the Corel, it's a hairline, and Illustrator, it's 0.01, I believe. Is it 0.01 or 0.1, Anthony? I can't remember.
0.01. When in doubt, just go smaller.
Smallest, right. So if it's not the thinnest, it kept on being gray in the actual image instead of the red that you see here on the test. So if you see like a gray line, it means that it's not you didn't select the thinnest line. That's usually a problem you might have.
That's right. And for whatever program you guys are using, we should have a video online explaining what Lev was explaining just then. So we'll go back into our material database here. Now that we have all of our colors selected and they all have their own process, let's go here and make sure that our settings are correct. So because we are making our own material here, we'll have to make sure that these settings are correct. If we were selecting something that was in our database already, when we got our laser, these settings should be somewhat in the correct neighborhood. So for power, you can select, again, you're going to have to run some tests, but once you find your test, you can set that to whatever it may be.
Yeah, the max power on engraving would be 100, so 100% power.
That's right.
Same with the speed for engraving. Now the cut is a little different. John, can you explain why? I mean, for cutting on CO2, the power is 100. You can't go more than 100% power. But a lot of the times we put 1 or 2. We don't put 100 speed on the cut. Can you explain why?
That's correct. So the percentage for any cuts, the percentage for both engraving and cutting is always a percentage of the maximum engraving speed. So on something like a Speedy 300 or a Speedy 400, that's 140 inches per second, and that's really, really fast. And there's no way you'd ever be able to cut through anything at that speed. So typically, the fastest you might go on, say, for instance, to cut something really thin like a piece of paper, you might be at 4% speed, and 4% of 140 inches per second is still really moving quite fast. So the reason it's always a lower number is because it's a percentage of an extremely high number, being the engraving speed. For cutting through thicker materials, like for instance, maybe a 1/4 inch piece of wood, you'll often be less than 1. So for instance, on maybe our machine here, 100 watt, we might be at 0.7 or 0.8% speed to get through a 1/4 inch piece of acrylic. So it really just sort of depends on the thickness, but for it to be fractional is completely normal as far as that percentage is concerned for cut speeds.
Yeah, and you can go like 0.75, 0.76, so it'll be, you can adjust the percentage to that degree, and that usually helps with different cutting materials.
Yeah, so just make sure, guys, that you're engraving. It does happen to me almost, I would say, weekly. You know, you're trying to get your settings in quick, and you might type in here, instead of 1, you might type in 100, and that is not going to be good for your file or your material. Again, or vice versa, you might type in 0.80 for your engraving, and of course, that's going to be way, way, way too slow to engrave anything with any good quality. But just keep an eye on that, guys, and you should be fine. So moving on here, we have our PPI here. John, did you want to explain the PPI?
Yeah, PPI stands for pulses per inch, and that should always be equal to the DPI that we used in the print driver. So we used 500 DPI in this particular case, and the DPI basically sets the number of back and forth engraving raster lines per linear inch down or up the job, as the case may be. So that's why we always want it to match, so that we don't get any strange patterns going on here. One easy way to make it always match for the engraving is to check on auto. And what that does is, even if you, for instance, change to 333 DPI instead of 500, it will automatically adjust your PPI to match the DPI for you. So it's nice to leave that on. I like to leave auto on for all the engraving settings. It's one less thing to worry about, and it just always turns out perfect. So it's a good thing.
John, you mentioned you would change it when doing fiber, right?
Yeah. For fiber, you're always running in hertz. So yeah, you would want to check that off for fiber and specify a frequency there. That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving on, we covered the PPI and the hertz. So like John said, you can always select auto, and that should register the DPI that you selected in CorelDRAW or whatever it might be. So you really, again, don't have to think about that. Passes here, of course, we have 1 pass on. If you have 2 passes, the laser is going to do the job twice on that font or the red line, if it's the red line that is selected. And again, you might select this for certain materials. I know things like softer foams, you might want to use multiple passes with a lower power to get rid of any melting or charring that might be going on.
Yeah, some people use, like, our textured material has a very, very thick top layer. So sure, you could do it in one pass with lots of power, but then you'll have a lot of that residue, especially if you don't have the masking on, the original masking. So a lot of people would use, lower power with 2 or 3 passes. I mean, again, it just depends on the material and what you're doing. Same thing with wood. You're not looking for a lot of that residue, especially if you don't have that top layer, if you don't have a masking on it. You may want to do lower power in multiple passes.
Yeah, so moving on to air assist. We have air assist on here for everything here. This is not correct. For air assist, when engraving, most of the time you're going to want to have your air assist off. And the reason for this is when you are engraving, there will be fine particles that are coming off of your material. And when they come off your material, you're going to want to make sure that they're out of the way of the laser beam. So with the air assist off, they're going to go into the air around the laser beam and get sucked out by the laser's ventilation system. Whereas if we had this on, the laser beam might take those particles, and as it's blasting through the materials, it's blasting those particles back onto your material, and you're going to get kind of a gritty surface, maybe a less quality of a picture or whatever it is you're engraving.
John, can you just touch on why it's important to have on for cut?
Yeah, most materials, if you don't have it set to on, well, there's two things. First of all, your material may flame up, so that's certainly the case if you're trying to cut engraving plastic or acrylics or rubber. The second thing that's important too is to make sure it's on to protect the lens. So if you have the nozzle on the laser head on a Speedy 300 or a Speedy 400, basic rule of thumb is if nozzle on, air must be on. If the nozzle is off, then it doesn't matter as much, but nozzle on, air must be on. And if you try to have the nozzle on and no air, that nozzle will basically act almost like a scoop, and it can pull smoke up onto the lens and you can damage it. So it's very important that if you're running the nozzle, you have the air on to protect the lens.
Yeah, and if you're cutting anything, most likely you need the nozzle on.
Most likely, yes. The only exception would be something like paper, where the air might blow the pieces around. But for most heavier materials, yeah, you would want to have it on.
Perfect, thanks.
And if you are doing papers and you're worried about it, you can always get the vacuum table to keep those papers secure. So moving on here, we have our air assist set for our cuts. We're going to have them on. And for our engraving, we have them set to off. Moving on to the Z offset, this will lower or raise your table to whatever you may set it here. And there are different reasons why you might want to do this. First thing that comes to mind is if you're engraving multiple materials, maybe there's 2 materials of different thicknesses, you might want to have a second offset for your second material so the laser can make that adjustment so it doesn't interfere with the first material. There are different methods using the Z offset to achieve different outcomes with your materials, such as burning and charring, or less burning and charring. Or you could, if you're doing acrylics, you can get your acrylic to engrave clear rather than a frosty white. So again, we do have videos on all of this as well.
Sorry, we just have a quick question. So it's okay to have air off and nozzle on if you're engraving, but air on, nozzle on if you're cutting?
If the piece is small, then yes. If the piece is large, like for instance, if you're doing a full quarter sheet of engraving plastic, I would take the time to do the engraving without the nozzle and without air, and then go back as a separate job and do the cuts with the nozzle on and the air on. If you try to engrave a full quarter sheet with the nozzle on and no air, you're probably going to get a significant amount of debris on the lens, so that should be avoided.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And also, Anthony, I should mention the Z offset. I mean, we have multiple videos. Like if you the out of focus method, I think that Mike Clark did. If you want a blacker engraving on the Trolleys plastics, you might want to put it a little bit out of focus. Again, I mentioned with the acrylic, if you're in focus on the acrylic, it'll engrave white. But if you want to have a clear engraving, the reason you want to have a clear engraving, for example, if you're doing a trophy, for example, or a plaque, and you're reverse engraving on the back of the acrylic, and you want to put like a rub and buff or acrylic paint on the back, if you're engraving that with in focus, you won't see the paint on the other side. You want to have a clear engraving so you'll take it out of focus. And usually we put anywhere from 0.03 to what, Anthony, 0.25 out of focus?
I would say 0.2, 0.25. Again, you're going to have to play with it, especially when you're painting. Paint doesn't go on as a perfect layer. So again, some more trial and error will have to happen. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Z offset, again, check out some of the videos. Mike Clark has some great videos on this. There are a lot of features that you can use using the Z offset. So moving on to direction, this is great. This wasn't in some of the older versions of JobControl, so if you're following along with us right now and you might not see this, don't panic. We can still change your direction of your laser, and we'll show you that very shortly. But what this does will basically determine where your laser is going to start from to start engraving. So if we select bottom up, your laser will start from the bottom of the laser working area.
John, can you, sorry, John, can you just mention, sorry, can you mention why somebody would engrave bottom up as opposed to top down?
Yeah, I would say bottom up should be used almost all the time. What it does is it allows, so for instance, when you're engraving from the bottom up, the exhaust is at the back of the machine. And it allows the exhaust to pull the smoke and debris across an area that hasn't been engraved yet. So if you do the other way, top down, it's actually pulling it across stuff that's already been engraved. It might be a little warm, might be a little bit sticky. So you end up actually getting some of that smoke sticking to your engraved area, which is what we don't want. Many people, I'm sure, if you've ever tried to engrave red and white plastic, that's always the nightmare combination, because if you're engraving top down, you end up with pink engraving instead of white. And that's because that red smoke has gone in and it's stuck to the sticky white inside material, and it's turned it pink on you. So to avoid that, we engrave bottom up. So what it does now is it's sucking that red smoke across red surface material, and it doesn't color it anymore. So that's how you get that nice white engraving. The only area where I would not run bottom up engraving would be on engraving rubber for rubber stamps. For some reason, the dust seems to clear out of the sheet better when you are engraving top down versus bottom up. I'm not exactly sure why that is. It just seems to be better for airflow when you do it top down on rubber. But for basically everything else, I'd say there's no reason not to do bottom up.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
Yeah, so just a visual representation here, guys. As you're engraving from the bottom here, you're going to be engraving upwards. Your vents here are going to be sucking the smoke upwards. So you want to start from the bottom because you're engraving. If you were to start from the top and that smoke is getting dragged across, that smoke or those fumes are going to get caught in the actual depth of your engraving, which is why you'll get those sticky residues and discoloring of your engravings.
Thanks, Anthony.
Just one other point, that that new ability to have that changeable by material and in your material database is present in the new JobControl 11. So we definitely recommend that everybody upgrade to that. It's a fantastic new feature. It really makes your life a lot easier if you're engraving a lot of plastics.
John, we have a quick question. Can we make bottom a default?
You have to put it on into your material settings for each material, but it will, once you've done that, it will default to that from that point on. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. Somebody's asking, what is the cost to upgrade from version 10 to 11 of JobControl? So we can't give pricing online, first of all, because we could have people from around the world watching, and the pricing could be different based on the region. So if you're looking for pricing, just email us. You can email YouTube at troteclaser.ca, and we'll get that in, or you can contact John directly. I'm going to post that in the chat for pricing. Anthony, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, that is our direction. This again will only work for engraving because of course you're cutting where your lines are placed. Next is advanced. There are some options in here. John, did you want to explain some of these?
Basically, the main ones to be concerned with are correction for the purposes of cutting. So what it does is, this is probably the most difficult thing to explain, but when the laser goes to make a sharp corner, so for instance, if you're cutting a triangle, the laser has to lower the laser power as it physically lowers the speed to make the corner. So what it does is it proportionally lowers that power so that it doesn't overburn the piece. What this correction number sets is the floor that it's allowed to go down to. So even if it comes to a dead stop to make that corner, in this case, it's still going to be firing at 10% of the 30% power that we've asked for. What this basically means is if you're trying to cut through a very thick piece of material, maybe a piece of 3/8 inch acrylic or 9mm, what it will do is, for instance, if you find that your straight lines are cut through but the corners are not, that's an indication your correction setting is too low. So basically, as it's coming to make that corner, it's lowering it too much and there isn't enough to get through the part. So by raising that number up to maybe 30 or 40, that will give it enough power in the corner to get through and give you a proper result. Next on the list here is links. That's basically only used for rubber, and occasionally people will do it when making cutouts for scrapbooking. What it does is it lowers the laser power every roughly ½ an inch and leaves a little tab to keep the part in the sheet. So this is very useful for rubber stamps. If you've ever done rubber and didn't use this feature, you'll find you had to actually clean each individual stamp die by hand with like a toothbrush. It's very inconvenient and very cumbersome. If you use the links feature, it allows you to engrave an entire sheet of rubber stamps and then clean the whole sheet all at once. So it allows you to basically clean an entire A4 size sheet of rubber in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes versus taking probably ½ an hour. So it's a massive time savings. High quality mode. This is a really important feature for certain plastics, namely the metallics. If you have this off, you'll find that if you engrave, my favorite example is the word lawyer. There's an ascender above the lowercase l or even the uppercase L, and there's a descender with the Y in the word lawyer. And you may find that the top of the L and the bottom of the Y look a little bit different in the engraving result than the rest of the word. And that's because the laser is moving only over that area. So it's engraving at a much, much slower speed than it is when it's hitting the rest of the word. So high quality mode basically forces the machine to engrave a full swipe, regardless of whether it's just a small little stick of an L or a Y there, or whether it's the full word. And because it's moving at a consistent speed over the entire word, it makes the quality very uniform and look very perfect overall. Next one on there is raster correction. I won't get into the nuts and bolts behind it, but essentially if you're engraving photos, it's a good idea to turn it on, but the rest of the time you want to leave it off. And the last one on the list there is IPC. That stands for Intelligent Path Correction. And what that does, Anthony, if you can click on the drop down there, it will change the acceleration of the machine while cutting to optimize for either speed or accuracy.
Huh.
And do you usually want to have that on or off IPC?
I personally always leave it off. It's a relatively new feature, and it's something that I don't use quite often, to be honest. It will, if you leave it in accuracy mode, you will find that the cutting speed is lowered a little bit, and that's on purpose, of course, as it's trying to do the best possible accuracy on the job, and there's a bit of a speed penalty to this, of course, and vice versa with the speed. So if you have it set to speed, you'll find that yes, it will do the job a little bit quicker, but there will be a bit of a quality penalty to that as well.
Perfect. We have another question. If you're cutting shapes in Lamicoid, do you recommend cutting from the back of the material to front, or cut through the front to the back? I'm getting sticky edges.
Sticky edges are usually more due to the frequency being used for the cutting. So you want that on engraving plastic to be as low as possible. So 1000 is really the where you want to be at for that. If you're trying to cut it at higher frequencies, you're definitely going to get a stickier edge for sure.
Thanks,
But
John.
position on the plate doesn't really play a factor in that.
Perfect. Okay, Anthony, I think we're good with the material database.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one more thing. With links, it's another great feature. If you want to make perforation marks or folding, like scored folding lines, links is a great way to do it. If you have a lot of score lines, rather than making them in CorelDRAW or whatever your design program is, sending all those separate little lines is really going to take up a lot of memory of your computer. So it's going to take a long time to send that file over to JobControl. So just making a line and selecting it as a link for that specific color will dramatically increase the speed of your loading times.
And I just want to mention, I think we did a video for type in Trotec Canada stickers on YouTube search. Anthony, I think you used that option. We UV printed Trolley's lights material, and then we had those links so we can actually take the sticker material out of the main sheet of plastic, right?
That's right.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think that's all for the material database. I did promise you guys I'd show you where to find this direction. If you don't have it, it's most likely because you have an older version of JobControl, but not to worry, you can always come here to plate, go to plate setup, and it will be just under here. Should be located right here. And again, you can always go there using one of the icons here.
Anthony, can you just show where they would put the rotary? I mean, we might do a separate webinar just on rotary, but where could they find that option in JobControl to turn on the rotary attachment?
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you that don't know, we do have a rotary attachment. It's great for if you want to do engravings on round objects like mugs or cups or bats or anything like that, rings. So to enable that, you're going to want to turn off your laser, plug it in, and then go to JobControl, select your, you could come here to Options or Settings Options. And you're going to go down to Hardware here, Accessories, and you'll see a check mark here for rotary attachment. Check that, turn your laser on, and you should be good to go with your rotary attachment. And like Lev said, we'll have a video on the rotary attachment in the future. So next, I'm gonna show you a little bit about our calculation window here. This is very good if you're using your laser to make money. If you're running a business, which I think most of you are, you're going to want to know how to use this. It's very easy. You can click on your file here, or you can select a file from your job queue as well, and you'll see now a calculation that the laser is doing to give you an estimated time of when this job and how fast this job can be done. So you can see here we have an engraving icon and some scissors for the cutting icons here. So engraving is going to take 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Cutting, our red lines are going to take 17, blue 14 seconds. It does seem a little long to me. So you can see down here the update button is flashing. That means it was still calculating. So keep on pressing this update button until it stops flashing, and you should get a pretty accurate time of how long your job's going to take. Once you know how long your job's going to take, you can now quote your clients if they're asking for hundreds or thousands, hopefully, then you can quote them on how long that should take. The next, so we're pretty much coming to a close here. We're going to go through these icons here. They are somewhat helpful if you're using them, and most of them do have quick commands.
Do you want to just quickly show like what those numbers represent, especially the where it says the 2-inch lens? So if you're switching lenses,
Yes.
you want yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, so like Lev was saying, if you are using a different lens, you're going to want to make sure your laser is not going to know automatically that you've put a 2-inch lens in or a 1.5-inch lens in. So you're going to want to select your drop-down menu here and select the lens that you have put into your laser. If you don't have the right lens in, what possibly could happen is when you go to focus your laser, it'll think that it has a different lens in it, so it may crash into the material that you're trying to focus on. For instance, if you're trying to focus with a 1.5-inch lens, but the laser thinks you have a 2-inch lens in there, or sorry, vice versa, it might crash into your materials. So moving on here, we have
not only that, it'll give you an error if you have the wrong lens. If you switch lens, it'll give you an error. Like if you don't want to shoot a fiber laser source into a CO2, it'll pop the lens. So it'll give you an error before it does that.
Yeah, anytime you're switching to a fiber lens, you should get prompted before doing so. So moving on, we have our percentage of, if you want, you can manually adjust your zoom levels, or you can use your scroll wheel and zoom in and out on your working area. Here we have our X and our Y. If you'd like, you can change these. If you have your material your job selected, you could change these to an exact position of where you want that to be. So if I change this to 10, enter it, you saw there, it moved our material over. Now you may be wondering where it's referencing, from what point. So that drop-down menu here, you can see it says job position is in the center. We can do top left corner, top right, bottom as well. So moving on, we have, that is the position of our job. Here is the position of our laser head. So you can select, if you did have, for whatever reason, a specific point that you wanted your material to lay in, you can type that in here, and maybe not that much. Once you have your values, you can then click this button here, and it'll actually move the laser head directly to that specific point. So once that,
go ahead.
So if we were to click enter, once that had moved, now we know that's in our position that we've made, and we can snap our job to that position.
Also, Anthony, could you show the markers? I think that it's a very important, a great tool.
So you might want some markers. What markers will let you do is position. There may be many applications why you might use markers, but essentially, I use F8. You can move your laser head to a position. If you press F8 or use, I think there's a marker. You could add marker to job or press F8. You can now see it has added this little dot here. So if I move the laser head out of the way, we have a dot, marker, sorry. And now that marker can be used to position a job. And the great thing about them is you can place as many as you'd like. So if you're maybe doing jobs on different materials and you want them to be cut in a specific orientation, this may be how you do that. Again, there's a million ways to do anything, but we think that the markers here are very useful. And again, like I said, you can always add more. And if
the marker is really great for if you're doing jigs, and then you're switching the different nameplates, like you're switching the different jobs of the jig. You can put markers to where your actual, the actual cutouts of the jigs are, and then you can save that job, like the job control file. You can save it, and then when you switch jigs, you can just put, open that file already ready to go. So that's why markers are nice.
That's a great
option. You could do the same in your design file. This just gives you a little more freedom in job control.
Yeah, so in the design file, you might have to go back if you wanted to make an adjustment. With this, like I'm showing you now, you can just move them around on the fly or snap them right to your laser head. So it's much easier to do that with your hands rather than going back and forth through programs. If you come here on a marker, you can right click, you can double click it. And again, you can select the exact positioning of your X and your Y coordinates. And of course, you can delete them. If you do want them to be removed, the only way to delete them is to double click on them and delete them. So I know I've been frustrated sometimes trying to delete those with the delete button, but it's not going to work.
And then you can also set the markers from the actual job, not from the crosshair. If you click on the job and then right beside it, that marker button.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You select your job.
And it'll always be in the top left corner.
Top left corner there.
So let's say, like, if you guys saw our video on the jewelry on the agate stones, we've placed the agates all around the table just to show how the markers work. We would then put the crosshair or the laser head over each specific agate stone, and then we would put a marker where the job is, and then just drag our different jobs onto the position. So it's a nice feature to use.
Yeah, so I just remembered one more thing in the material database that I think I should cover, guys. So we'll go back in here. With our blue, you can see here blue. Of course, we can use it as a cut, but we like to use here kiss cuts. And kiss cuts are basically marking your material for whatever reason it may be. Of course, I just wanted to mention that kiss cut is not an actual drop-down menu selection here. What we're doing when we say kiss cuts is we're using the cutting with CO2 method, but we're just using a very low power here, very low. We just want it
Usually at high speed.
We just want it to kiss the surface. So we can do let's say 10, and like Lev said, because we're not really cutting anything, we're going to use a higher speed, kind of like what we were doing within the engraving up here, and that's just to mark lines on our material. I just thought I'd cover that.
Do we have the cut options, the job control cut in here?
Yeah, so if you, what Lev is mentioning is Lev, is this what you're mentioning? You right click on this and you can repeat the cut line or just only the cut line?
No, I was talking about like the new features of Job Control 11, but yeah, you should show that as well, outline jobs.
Right, so here's a feature. If for whatever reason, maybe you had your material settings entered incorrectly, you could, and when you ran your job, your material didn't get cut all the way through. So before picking it up and moving it around, I would suggest, if you could tell that it hasn't cut through, come here and you can repeat your cut lines. So by selecting this, it'll run the job again, ignoring any engraving. Again, we do have our working area here, and we can see where our laser head is, and we do know where our jobs are being placed. But again, if you want to be extra sure, triple check your job. You can always outline the job, and now the laser will do a perfect outline on your material in the laser of where your file is going to be getting cut.
One thing I should quickly mention, let's say if you're engraving the job and you're not happy with it, like once it goes, you want to redo the job again, you have to right click and reset job before you press play again. Otherwise it won't play after the job's been done.
That's right. So like Lev was saying, once we run this once, our piece you'll see you won't be able to see it anymore. It'll be gray, not black like this. And to run it again, if you're making any changes on your working area, you'll have to right click it and reset your job. Our quick way to do that is with Control R. Again, if you're just running the same job, there's no changes being made, put a new piece of material in, press play on the laser, and it'll run the same job again without having to reset the job. So
I mean, we're just over an hour. So do we want to show the features of the job control cut?
Job control cut.
John, like I think it's in the vector section at the.
No, yeah, just go to the top job in the queue, right click on it.
Oh, like edit the job?
Yeah, you have to do edit job. It has to be within the queue.
Yeah, so some great new features with Job Control 11. So if you click on your, you can see there we edited our job. This is new in Job Control 11. You have our shape here. So this is great if whatever reason you made a mistake, or maybe you want to make a minor change. It's kind of a hassle having to go back into your design program and resending that to Job Control. So Job Control now you can make some minor adjustments with your file in Job Control. So we could click on our file here. If you come here and unlock geometries, you now have the option to move your nodes around. You can move your lines, reposition them. And I'll quickly go through here, but we will have a video on the new features of JobControl in the future. So you can click here, you'll see, it'll show you where the laser head's gonna move. So you can actually see where all of your tool paths are gonna be. So possibly you can save time with this, or maybe you have a piece or material somewhere that is higher than the material you have in your laser. So you wanna avoid that piece because your laser head will hit it. So you can rearrange these laser path tools, or these laser tool paths to go around that raised piece. And there's many other applications why you would want to use that. Next, you can show
usually, John, if you're cutting like a piece of acrylic and the laser starts on the line, you have that little blob, like that tiny little blob. So you want to start it from coming in, right? That's
yeah.
where
So Anthony, that's under draw, and you can do lead in there. So you just up on the top menu, click draw.
Oh.
And then, no, we must have to be, sorry, we have to be, the lock mode must not be correct.
Sorry, what are you trying to do right now?
Lev's talking about putting a lead in on it.
Oh, right. Okay, so you could come here. So you can see here, it's telling us it's going to start right here, and it's also going to end right here. So sometimes at the start and end point, what Lev is saying is it'll leave a line or a marking on your tool, or sorry, on your material, and you may not want that. So what you can do is draw a separate line.
Sorry, Anthony, I think it's the blue pointer there, and then you have to select the object.
This?
Nope, over to the right, there's a blue arrow. Yeah, click that, and then click the object.
Ooh.
There you go. Now you should be able to go to draw and then lead in. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, even when you're cutting like thick acrylic, and you could sometimes, if you want that very flame polished edge, you might even be able to see where that laser first hit the acrylic. So having the lead in is a really nice option to have.
Yeah, and I just want to show, this is all great. Moving your nodes around, making your job quicker by seeing your tool paths. That's all great. Something that's really great if you want to make this bigger, they've put the option in here to enlarge your, you can mirror, you can enlarge on the fly. So if you're doing signage, rather than having to go back in your design program, open this up in JobControl, and you can now make this file bigger or smaller if you'd like, or mirror it if you have to put it on a window or anything like that.
Yeah, I think we might have a separate video for
sure,
that. Yeah. Somebody just asked, does changing the ZX value in JobControl adjust the table height? And the answer is yes. The other question was, does JobControl 11 support multiple machines on one workstation, or is it still one workstation per machine?
One workstation per machine.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Anthony, I think, is there anything else that we've left off for the basics? I think with the cut, we just wanted to give a little preview. We'll have more videos on that later on. Is there anything else that's on your list there?
Yeah, I just want to show you guys one more thing. It is very useful. Once you have your job here, you don't have to send your job over 1,000 times. If you want to cut this 100 times on the same piece of material, you can press Control-D to duplicate, or we also have, where is it? Duplicate.
I think if you right-click on the file, it'll say duplicate.
Right, so you could duplicate by right-clicking on it, or I like to use Control-D, and that will generate a new file right beside it. Maybe your file, you don't want it to be engraved this way or cut this way. Maybe you want to rotate it. So again, you can come up here and rotate your job, or Control Space, and now your job has rotated. I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to cover. There are, actually, let's do this one more time. On the fly here, you can control your settings here. So maybe if you are doing that the trial and error phase, you can do that quickly here rather than having to go back into your settings and change them over and over. You can come here, select your thickness, your power, velocity, PPI for engraving, and also for cutting, and then save it.
Perfect. I think that's it. As far as the basics, I mean, we've already covered over an hour what we've expected. If you guys have, Anthony, is there anything else? John, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's good for a basic overview.
Yeah.
Anthony, if you want to click on stop presenting. Okay, guys. So again, this video will be on our, and sorry, Anthony, just put the webcam on you for a second. Guys, if you have any questions later on that pop up, you can always put it in the, you can always write them in the description, under the description, and we'll answer them as soon as possible. I want to thank, sorry, Anthony, did you put the webcam on you for a second?
Oh.
Just so good people can see you. Awesome. Okay, I want to thank John again for being here. So we have multiple requests for pricing. So just email that email, youtube@troteclaser.ca, and we'll get your request over to John directly. I want to thank Anthony again for a wonderful webinar. And yeah, thanks very much.
See you guys.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Anthony. Have a good one.